Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins. I have the pleasure today to be joined by Matt Brooks, and looking forward to digging in a little bit to his time in the military, his transition, and to what he's doing today. For those that may not be familiar with the MilVet provides an executive platform for veterans, transitioning veterans, or veterans that have been out for a while, a platform for them to explore opportunities in the venture capital and private equity backed space. A space that a lot of veterans may not be familiar with or they're interested in. So if you want to learn more about these opportunities, I encourage you to check out themilvet.org, sign up for our podcasts, come to any of our events that we host, and just learn more. Reach out to our recruiters. We'd be happy to share information with you if you're interested in learning more about that. But today we're focused on the podcast, and Matt, great having you here. I'm gonna tee up the conversation a little bit before you do your intro with a story you shared with us, because I thought it was very insightful and hopefully something the audience will appreciate as well in this time of football college playoffs going on. Matt played football at the Air Force Academy, and his claim to fame, I don't know if claim to fame, but I thought it was a pretty good claim to fame. He caught one touchdown pass in his entire career at the Air Force Academy, and it happened to be against, of all teams, Notre Dame. And although they lost the game, it's a memory that lasts forever, certainly for you and your family. But Matt, welcome to the show. I'd love you to talk about that, talk about what you're doing now, and let's get this thing started, man. Great to have you.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Beau. Important caveat. I caught one pass total. It happened to be a touchdown. And I think the lesson there, a couple of lessons came out of that. I had one ball thrown to me in 4 years of playing football at Air Force. Fortunately, I caught that pass. Unfortunately, we lost the game. And so I guess my lesson is like, in life, when, you never know when a pass is going to be thrown your way, but when you have the opportunity, catch it. But then secondly to that, and I think the only people who remember that catch are myself and my mother. And that's because we lost the game 44-14. And at the end of the day, like, individual accolades are great, but nobody cares. And it's really irrelevant unless the team wins. And so some good lessons there, but happy to be with you today.
No, that is, I think that's super important that you bring that up, because again, obviously something you'll never forget. I'm sure your mom will never forget, but the idea of, if it didn't happen in a victory, it probably doesn't have the same impact, right? And it's about the team success, not the individual success, that really, I mean, certainly for veterans, but for any of us, whether you're in the military or in the civilian world, that's what it's all about, right? It's about being part of that team. If you want to be successful, being part of that team is such an important, for all of us to be successul, is having that team around us. And you can't do it alone, right? Can't do it alone, for sure.
Yeah,
I'll pivot from there and just kind of talk about just how did you get to the Air Force? What was kind of the impetus of your joining the military in the first place? Obviously through the Air Force Academy and into the Air Force. How did all get started for you?
Yeah. I'm blessed to have attended the Air Force Academy. It wasn't a natural progression for me, to be completely honest. I didn't come from a military family. Like most people my age, both of my grandfathers had served briefly in the Navy in World War II, but my dad was not in the military. I didn't have any close relatives in the military. And then one day, my senior year, kind of out of the blue, the phone rang, and it was a football coach from the Air Force Academy asking me if I was interested in coming out to campus and taking a look around and potentially playing football for the Air Force Fighting Falcons. And, I wanted to of course, happy to take that free ticket to Colorado Springs and tour the campus. But I'll be candid. The minute I stepped foot on the campus, I knew it was something for me. I had, I didn't have the greatest grades. I didn't have a lot of extracurricular activities. I was an athlete, and I looked around there and I saw an opportunity to add some structure to my life, to be a part of something bigger than myself. And so, when the time came, at the end of that long weekend, I told the coach who was touring me around that I wanted to attend. And I went, candidly, from a leafy suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, where I grew up, to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and getting my head shaved and going into basic training, having no idea what I was getting myself into. Fast forward 22 years later, I retired from the service. We could probably get into a little bit about that, but I graduated from the academy. I went to pilot training, became a bomber pilot. I flew the B-1 bomber most of my career. A few short years after I was checked out in the B-1, 9/11 happened, and it really, in the post 9/11 world, as you know, it was kind of off to the races. It was deployments, it was operations, it was, essentially defending our freedom overseas. And so, as I guess I would say I never envisioned myself serving a career in the military, but I did, right? I was honored to do it. And I flew the B-1, the B-2, stealth bomber, and the B-52 as well, and met a lot of incredible people and had a lot of great experiences, and really just an honor to serve.
No, that's a great story. And again, I think from starting, when you unpack that, and the concept, or the in reality, as a senior in high school, had no idea that you would take this path to get to the Air Force Academy and to spend that many years, in the military service. Obviously, something stuck with you, from your time in the academy that, obviously helped you be successful, I think, through your Air Force career. I mean, are there things that you would say that, or what were the takeaways, or maybe, a couple takeaways that, whether it's your time at the academy or maybe your formative years in the Air Force, that, that stuck with you, that helped you be not only successful in the military, but have, kind of translated over into your, civilian career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the first thing that comes to mind is ultimately the Air Force core values. And in the mid 90s, when I was at the Air Force Academy, the chief of staff at the time, General Ron Fogelman, had really, really embraced this idea of our service developing these core values: integrity first, service before self, excellence in all you do. And as I think about my service, and kind of that North Star and what was meaningful to me is those core values, and so that was kind of the foundation that, of course, that resonated with me. Look, at the end of the day, I believe military service, while, of course, we all sign up to serve and, defend our Constitution, really it's about the people. And I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard that on this podcast, and it won't be the last, but for me in particular, the people that I had the opportunity to serve with, the lifelong friends that I met, and really going shoulder to shoulder, with those people into combat, was something that I just am blessed to have been able to do. And it was my greatest takeaway was the value of those people and the high quality Americans that are out there on the front lines defending our nation and its freedoms.
No, we certainly hear that a lot, right? That it's about the people. I mean, it's definitely, I think that's why we don't know that that's what it's going to be all about when you get there. But when you get in,
Right.
again, I had a similar plan. I got into the Marine Corps after time at UVA, at University of Virginia. I thought I'd do 4 years. I would get out, go back, get my MBA, but I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the mission. It was just somewhere I felt like it was, again, I played football in college as well. And it was like the next team, and it was a team, and I got it, and I felt like you learn your position, and it was just one of those things I didn't expect it, but it kind of almost found me by mistake and end up loving it and doing 25 years as well. So I certainly can relate to that. And you hear that a lot. It's not like something that you certainly, it sounds like you weren't planning on doing 25. You had no idea that that's what that would lead you to. But when you find that vocation, when you find that calling, when you find the people that you are like-minded with, and you have that shared sense of purpose and community, it's something special, you know. And I think it's hard to find it in the outside world as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I think that that's something I really appreciate during my transition, was, really just like the people that, and the motivations of the folks who are serving are, sometimes quite different than what you find out in the private sector. And so, and that's that is absolutely, a takeaway for me. During my 22 years, so my grandfather, who I previously mentioned, served in the Navy. He was an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say during my 22 years that I didn't think a lot about, what came next, right? Or what would be next. And I always had this desire to follow in my, dad's footsteps and be an entrepreneur. And I'm sure we'll get into that, but it's important, I think. Another takeaway is to really just kind of be thoughtful about, even while you're serving, we all transition out, right? And what that looks like, and how that might, the different paths that might lead you down.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great transition to that piece for you. And obviously, we initially met at here in Tampa at one of the
Yeah.
Star Network events. But I'd love to hear about how you approached your transitions. It sounds like you at least had an inkling of what you wanted to do. I mean, maybe not, certainly not exactly what you wanted to do, but you probably didn't want to stay in government service. You didn't want to go do a traditional route. To be an entrepreneur is a little bit non-traditional, although a lot of veterans do it. What was kind of
Yeah.
the calculus you had, and the approach you took? I think it's important. Again, I think everybody's journey is a little different. And again, I think if you can share how you kind of mapped out your transition process, and again, every road's a windy one, I know, but I'm
Yeah.
curious, what your map looked like, and what the reality looked like, and kind of how you ended up where you are. Let's kind of dig into that some.
Yeah, the map was a little bit fuzzy, I would say, but I did think a lot about the transition, and I had role models around me, that, again, my dad was an entrepreneur, my grandfather was an entrepreneur. They both owned small businesses, and I think as I reflect back, I saw the impact that they, as small business owners, could have in their local community. And I didn't appreciate that initially. And we'll probably talk about the impact of entrepreneurship, but I did know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I researched a lot about, starting a small business, buying a small business, and really getting into business ownership myself, in years before I ended up retiring from the service. I would say, a plot twist in my own, personal situation. My dad had founded a small business, here in Florida. After I went to the academy, they relocated from St. Louis, Missouri, down to Florida, and my dad had some, success as a small business owner. But he founded a small business, and ultimately, that business was growing, but unfortunately, he had developed some pretty major, health issues that, unfortunately, eventually he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he really had no succession plan. The opportunity was like, hey, he can try to sell it, or to figure out how to transition this business. And so he approached me about taking over the family business, and it was a small, hotel supply company. Essentially, it's called RFID Hotel. We did hotel key cards, for all of the major brands of hotels. It's amazing the different ways in this world to make a buck, but my dad had figured out a way to make a buck, selling, hotel keys, and that business was was here in Florida, and he asked me to take over that business for him. And I agreed after a lot of consultation with my wife and thinking about the opportunity. Ultimately, I agreed to do it, but I told my dad that I didn't want to be his employee. I wanted to own the company, and so we reached an agreement where I would come in and buy his interests in the business. After a period of time, I served as an employee for 6 months, essentially as the GM and president of the business, but then ultimately with the plan of buying that business from my father. And so that's essentially how I became an entrepreneur. Later on down the line in my journey, I determined that there's a thing called entrepreneurship through acquisition, ETA, which is all the rage on many business school campuses these days. And that's how I became an entrepreneur, is essentially through ETA. I bought my dad's business.
God, that's obviously a unique opportunity you had, having a father that
Yeah.
had a small business. But still, I think, you had to go through you chose that route to go through as an entrepreneur kind of. I think there's a lot of tracks people take when they leave the military, and entrepreneurship in the big picture is a track, so to speak. Are there things that you did knowing that? Because again, I think there are a lot of transitioning veterans that are interested in entrepreneurship and owning their own business. Are there things that you did that you would encourage other people, or resources out there for entrepreneurs? Because again, I think that's something that is probably that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people maybe are afraid of it because it's a leap, right? More than going to a traditional, like I went to Amazon. That's a big, brick and mortar kind. That's a pretty more traditional path, right? Going to be a GS employee, very traditional for a lot of military. Entrepreneurship seems a little scary because there's less, I guess, guardrails on it. And what did you do to make it less scary, or to kind of dig into it? I mean, yours, again, I think yours maybe was a little bit less scary because you obviously had your father involved, but you still had to jump in some way, shape, or form. And I'm curious, what would you advice you would have for other veterans that want to get into and become entrepreneurs themselves?
Yeah. So if I had known way back when that entrepreneurship through acquisition was a thing, I think that would have been helpful to me, because I was kind of figuring it out as I go. But to your point, there's a lot of literature out there on ETA. There are some great books that I highly recommend that people consider reading. There are course programs out there. Most business schools in America these days have like an entrepreneurship track, or entrepreneurship through acquisition cohorts or curriculums as well. And then there are myriad podcasts out there where prospective buyers are out evaluating businesses, and you learn, in my experience has been you learn a lot through listening, right? And so ultimately it's just reading, learning as much as you can, and then of course making sure that your financial house is in order, right? Like buying a business is not cheap, even if you're buying it from your dad. Believe me, it's not. There's a family discount, but it's not that big of a family discount. Like nobody's giving away anything for free in this world, and so it's really making sure that you and your family are prepared financially. Now, as a retiree, of course, we do have the benefit of, essentially, if you serve for 20 years, you have a retirement, medical benefits, those kinds of things. And in my view, that's, essentially a differentiator and an advantage that a veteran might have over, somebody who did not have the opportunity to serve.
Do you and we'll post some of these links on the podcast, but are there specific books, specific podcasts, specific things, classes you took or resources you tapped into from the military potentially? What are some concrete things that you should read this?
So
I wish I would have read that. I wish I would have done this. Give us the facts, man.
For sure. So I would say that the number one book resource I recommend is Buy Then Build by Walker Deibel. He's a known entity a serial entrepreneur who's published essentially a textbook on buying and then building a business. Podcasts I recommend. Acquisitions Anonymous, absolutely something I listen to. Another one that's a little bit different, but I think it's important that as a prospective business buyer that you put yourself in the mind of a seller is before you buy or sell a business. That's a podcast as well. And then I have to make a plug through for I attended a fellowship at the University of Chicago, and they have an ETA curriculum there at the Booth School of Business. They publish a lot. There's a lot of opportunities online to read about ETA as well.
That's great.
There's also, I should add, there's some great conferences out there as well. Entrepreneurship through Acquisition conferences. The University of Chicago hosts one every fall in November timeframe for a couple of days. That essentially, and there's training tracks and things like that. Really great opportunities to understand how to go about buying a business.
No, that's great. And again, I love those tangible resources for the folks listening to our podcast that can then reach into, and we'll post some of those links as well. What I just kind of on the journey kind of your acquisition of the business, what would you say was maybe the most unexpected, or what was the hardest part of it for you that you maybe said, you had one idea of what it'd be like to acquire the business, and then in the reality, like, man, I wish I would have done something differently, or didn't expect that was to be that hard. I mean, anything that really kind of sticks up in your mind as something that was like, phew, I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, I think that, entrepreneurship in general is hard, and I did not appreciate that. People think, this person owns their own business, they must be rolling in money and doing all these things. And what you lose sight of is like the sleepless nights, the, making sure the bank account has enough money in it to make payroll on Friday, those kinds of things. And the headaches, that come along with it. So I'd say that, like, while the upside is very, very high, it's not without like a whole lot of hard work. And in my case, in my transition, my last job on active duty, I was the commander of the 5th Bomb Wing at Minot, North Dakota. I had 5,000 plus people working for me. I had a fleet of B-52 bombers under my responsibility. I had, essentially, an entire military installation. And when I retired in early June, I essentially came down to Florida, and 4 days later found myself running a 17-person small business, right? And so, in the first, like, literally the first day I was in the office, I was meeting with my controller, going over the P&L and the balance sheet and trying to get a handle on the numbers. And there's a knock at the door, and it's our warehouse manager, and he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a plumbing leak in the men's bathroom." And I'm like, okay. Like, in my last job, when I was commanding the 5th Bomb Wing, I would call civil engineering, and they would send a team of people over to take care of the leak. And in my case, I looked at my controller, I'm like, I guess we need to call a plumber. And she's like, yeah, and oh, by the way, I have to pay for it. Right. Like, so,
yeah.
Right. It is very, entrepreneurship is, and I didn't appreciate it, but it is incredibly hands-on, right? It is a 24/7, 365 job as a business owner. And people, tend to, at least I would say I, initially did not have full sight of that until I was really in it. Right.
Yeah. I think that's the thing that, from talking to other entrepreneurs, that first off, you have to be all in. Like, you can't just be like 75% in. I kind of want to do it. It's like, man, you got to push all your chips in the table and go with it and be convicted to do it, right? Because if you're not, you're not going to get there. And I think that's an interesting, that some people, maybe if you don't have the heart for it, understand it's an all in requirement to be successful in those roles. I think the other thing that I've talked to many folks about is that a lot of folks do have a partner or someone they can, kind of bounce things off of. Sound like you were pretty much by yourself on this. Was that?
Yeah,
I mean, that has to be even harder not to have someone that shared I say the pain, the highs and the lows. But I mean, that's a pretty, it's a daunting thing to do it by yourself, I would say. Is that fair?
for sure. And I learned very quickly that going it alone um, is not a way to be successful as an entrepreneur. And so
Yeah.
what I did in my case, I had called a friend and I was whining about a couple of various situations with the business, and he said, look, I don't have any advice for you on your business, but I do need to tell you, you need to go look at a group like Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global community of entrepreneurs, and become a member and get to a place where you can be in a community of like-minded individuals who are dealing with the same issues that you're dealing with as a small business owner. So, in my case, I joined EO. I've been a very active member of Entrepreneurs Organization for the last several years, and it's been a huge blessing to me to essentially be in a small group of other entrepreneurs that are going through similar challenges.
No, that's great. I love to hear that. I'm not surprised. Again, I think it can be lonely
Yeah,
if you're doing it by yourself and don't have someone to bounce things off of, like an XO or your OPSO or your Sergeant
right.
Major. You don't have that anymore. It's just
Yeah,
you. And I guess talk some now about from taking over right when you got out of the military to where you are now, what you're doing
yeah,
now. And what that journey has been like, and just kind of obviously you've grown and done more and more. I'd love to
yeah.
hear kind of how that's what you're doing and kind of how it all kind of, what the path that journey was like too.
Yeah, so I led RFID Hotel for about 4 years. Grew that business pretty dramatically. Ultimately, it's a story for another day, but ultimately it boils down to the things that we know as operators and leaders in the military. It's all about the right people, the right systems, and the right processes. And so I took that business from essentially a mom and pop shop and grew it into a no kidding company, right? And so over the course of that time, unfortunately, my dad was ill, and I had made a commitment to him to continue to grow the business, but I also knew that I had other ambitions as well. And so, as he was getting towards the end of his life, we made the decision to go ahead and sell that business. And so, I sold RFID Hotel about 8 months before my dad passed away, which was an incredible. It was a terrible story, but an incredible ending to his entrepreneurial life. And, it was a great outcome for our family. But I knew, ultimately after that exit, I wasn't done. I just wanted to, transition into doing more and helping people. And so I have a passion for veterans. I am a veteran, of course, and I have a passion for entrepreneurship. And so ultimately, over the last couple of years, I developed, essentially an investment firm called Second Echelon Capital. I invest in military veteran owned and led businesses, primarily as a minority partner, and primarily on the equity side. I'll come in and help a veteran acquire a small business, and then I'll serve alongside them as a limited partner, an advisor, serve on the board, and help them with more of the governance of the company and help them to grow that business.
That's awesome. I love to see how you have. You did it, you built it, you sold it, you went through the whole cycle of it, and now
Yeah,
you're at a place where you can, be that sounding board, be that support system for other veterans that want to do the same thing. And it's
yeah,
great to just hear how you've been able to pivot your personal journey and experience of taking a business full cycle to now where you can be impactful on multiple businesses and multiple veterans that are out there, which is great. And I love to hear that. Are there, if folks are interested in this, I guess what kind or what type or industries do you invest? I'm just curious for those that may want to learn more about, or engage with you.
yeah.
Is there a specific kind of a niche of the market that you are focused on, or just kind of talk a little more about what you're doing and how folks may want to engage with you could learn more?
Yeah, so I'll take a page from my good friend Todd Connor, who's a founder, one of the founders of Bunker Labs. Great guy. Todd told me a couple of years ago, and I steal it from him all the time. He's like, I'll always make time for any veteran, right? Like I will always make time. But in my case, I'll talk to any veteran. I'll talk to any veteran about entrepreneurship in particular. And while I'll talk and mentor anybody as they think about the transition, and I'm involved in a few organizations with that. When I think about like businesses that I invest in, I always say it's businesses that Matt Brooks can understand. And so in my case, I'm not a tech guy, right? Like I'm a knuckle dragging bomber pilot, like not like the sharpest knife in the drawer. And so typically it's home services businesses, distribution, logistics, light manufacturing, and then health and wellness. And so I've made, and a small portion of real estate as well. And so since I launched Second Echelon Capital in April, I've invested in 3 businesses. I'm getting ready to invest in the fourth, all in that kind of that realm of, like, I would say Main Street, mom and pop, type businesses. But I don't invest in startups, and I don't invest in like technology or restaurants. But again, I'll talk to any veteran who's interested in any of that. I'll talk to them. But I just tell you, like, and that's something else I would say is like learning when to say no. It's hard to say no sometimes, right? And like that's been the biggest challenge, right? Is like not every business is something that I would invest in. But again, I'll try to help in any way that I can.
No, I love that. I think, again, it's one of those things. If you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing, right? I mean, I think
Right.
you have to have a focus on, hey, look, I can go a mile deep on these
Yep.
few areas. I'll help you a little bit everywhere I can. I'll give you some
Yeah.
contacts. I'll give you some references, but I think it makes sense to be able to be the expert in certain areas and to know where you're the most effective as well. I mean, it's
Right.
the kind of business that you built and grew, and
Yep.
to be able to be impactful, obviously you have the most, personal experience, the business like that. And for folks that want to reach out to you, what's the best way? Is to go to is it a website? Is it what's the best way to reach out to you?
I would say website, email, or LinkedIn is all good. So website is secondecheloncapital.com. My email is matthew@secondecheloncapital.com. And then of course, LinkedIn, it's Matthew-R-Brooks-USA is my handle, but Matthew R. Brooks on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with anybody out there that's interested in the transition or in entrepreneurship in general.
Awesome. No, I love all that. And before we wrap up, anything else that you would recommend for transitioning veterans, or is there anything else that's kind of passion projects for you in the nonprofit side? What are you doing now? I mean, obviously that's your main, the number one thing you're doing.
Yeah.
But any kind of words of wisdom or places you're engaged in the community that folks should know about or maybe interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly I want to build, and my focus is continuing to build Second Echelon Capital. But I'm also engaged in other philanthropic areas. Certainly very passionate about veterans, and particularly disabled veterans, and providing them with outdoor recreational opportunities. And so my wife and I are big supporters of Dream Adaptive, which is a nonprofit out in Montana that we're very close with. And then here in Tampa, we're very involved with several community organizations. As I mentioned, I serve on the board of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization of Tampa Bay, and several others. But I think as you think about it, is like in my case, like it's okay to align commercial interests with like your passions, right? And that's something I learned over time. Is like I really value veterans and entrepreneurship, and so I spend most of my work both on the on the business side as well as like the nonprofit side, supporting those initiatives, and that's sometimes being aligned to your point as opposed to being kind of scattered all over is a good thing. At least I've found.
Love it. No, it's great. Again, I really appreciate your story from from just getting to the Air Force Academy, your time in the military, the transition. Yours is unique, obviously, with working in the entrepreneurship side and taking over a family business. But I think the lessons learned are very relatable to anyone that's transitioning and wants to be the entrepreneur. And obviously, taking that, growing it, and now doing it at a scale is awesome. And that's what it's all about. And find those ways to give back and send that elevator back down to help out other folks. I mean, again, I love it. I do that same kind of thing, and I think you need that. I mean, it gives you the juice to kind of you want to share your stories because you know how many mistakes you made in your transition. Hopefully, all of us can help other folks from making those same mistakes and learn from what we've done. So, thank you, Matt, for the time today. I really appreciate it. Excited to see where Second Echelon goes and the success it has as it moves forward. And I look forward to seeing you here in Tampa soon, man. Thanks again for the time.
Hey, thanks, Beau. I appreciate the opportunity and really appreciate the opportunity to tell my story.
Love it. Thanks again. Out here.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram @TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.